I never thought twice about shopping alone. Growing up in a mid-sized Illinois suburb, life always felt insulated from the kind of stories you hear on podcasts or see in those clickbait articles. Our Target sat on the edge of town, nestled between a strip mall and a quiet residential neighborhood with neat lawns and old oak trees. It wasn't just a store. It was the place my mom dragged me on boring Sunday afternoons, where high schoolers hung out when they had nowhere else to go, where I stopped after class or work to grab the usual stuff. It was familiar, safe, predictable, but I've learned that evil loves predictability. I was in my last semester of community college, juggling a waitressing job, a suffocating course load, and the creeping dread of what came next in life. My parents always told me to be frugal, so I still lived at home, doing what I could to save up before transferring to a 4-year college. That Target had become part of my routine, a stop I made almost every other day, whether I needed toiletries, snacks, or just an excuse to get out of the house and breathe. October was creeping in, the kind of gray, wet October that turns leaves to mush and makes everything feel damp and hollow. I remember the day exactly because it was so unremarkable, until it wasn't. I had pulled into the Target parking lot around 3:30 p.m., the sky already bruised with low clouds. I'd been fighting off a cold for days and I just wanted to grab some allergy meds, vitamin C, and maybe a cheap throw blanket I'd been eyeing. I parked closer to the garden center entrance, my usual spot, and went through the automatic doors greeted by the smell of popcorn and the faint hum of bad pop music over the speakers. Everything felt normal, until it didn't. I noticed him first in the cold medicine aisle. He wasn't particularly tall or built. Actually, the opposite. Thin, almost frail, with an awkward slouch that made him look like he was constantly trying to disappear into his own body. But what made my skin crawl wasn't his build. It was the way he stood, too still, too intentional. His eyes were what hit me hardest. Sunken, pale, hollow in a way that made me feel like I wasn't looking at a person, but something wearing a person's skin. His greasy, dark hair was slicked back into a style that tried way too hard to be trendy, paired with a sparse, patchy beard that didn't do him any favors. I tried to ignore him at first. I hovered in front of the allergy meds, pretending to debate between the store brand and the name brand, but my stomach twisted tighter with every glance I caught of him inching closer. I told myself I was being paranoid. Then came the voice, flat, soft, but unsettling. "Indecision's rough, huh?" I blinked and turned. He was right there. Closer than I realized. Too close. Yeah, I guess," I muttered, hoping to cut the interaction short. He didn't move away. Instead, he smiled. But it wasn't a smile. It was something else. Something that felt rehearsed, like a predator pretending to be human. "What's your name?" he asked, like he was entitled to it. I gave him a fake one. "Jenna." He grinned wider. "That's a cute name. Mine's Kyle." I mumbled something polite, grabbed the bigger bottle just to have an excuse to move, and turned to leave. That's when I felt it. His hand, on my shoulder. Not a hard grip, but enough to freeze me. Enough to flood my veins with ice. "Hey, wait," he said softly, as if we were already friends. "You're cute. Let me get your number." Every cell in my body screamed no, but I froze. I didn't want to make a scene. I didn't want to trigger anything. So, against every survival instinct I had, I gave him a number. My real number. I figured I could block him later. He typed it in like he'd just won the lottery. I left, shaking, telling myself he'd forget about me by tomorrow. I couldn't have been more wrong. When I pulled into my driveway 10 minutes later, I tried to shake it off. Told myself it was just a weird guy, an awkward encounter, nothing more. I grabbed a few grocery bags and headed toward the door. That's when I saw the car. It crept down the street and stopped, right in front of my house. Tinted windows, no plates visible. My breath caught in my throat. I knew. I just knew. It was him. I didn't need to see his face to feel his eyes on me. I abandoned my bags and ran inside, locking the door behind me. I peered through the peephole. The car idled for what felt like an eternity before slowly pulling away. That night, the texts started. At first they were awkward, clumsy attempts at flirting, trying to play off like we'd made some instant connection. But within hours, the tone changed. He got aggressive, accusatory. When I didn't reply, he sent paragraphs about how I was fated to be with him. When that didn't work, he turned to threats. I still hear the words sometimes in my head like an echo that won't fade. You belong to me, and if I see you with anyone else, they'll pay for it. I wanted to block him. God, I should have, but I didn't. I needed to know what he was planning. If I cut off my only window into his thoughts, I'd be blind. That's when the stalking escalated. It wasn't just the Target parking lot anymore. He started showing up at my job, a small cafe downtown, at school, in the parking lot of the gym I went to with my best friend Rachel. It got so bad my dad started driving me everywhere. But that only made it worse. One day after Rachel dropped me off from class, he texted me, "Hope your little driver enjoyed their face today. Next time I might not let them leave." That's when I cracked. I stopped relying on anyone. I figured if I was alone, I'd take away his excuse to threaten people I loved. But all it did was make me easier prey. It all came to a boiling point 2 weeks later. Back at Target. I should have avoided it, but I didn't want to let him dictate my life. So I went, mid-afternoon, assuming there'd be enough people around to make me feel safe. He followed me. Of course he did. I noticed him the second I pulled into the lot, his beat-up sedan slithering in behind me like a shadow. I bolted inside before he could catch up, but something felt off. He didn't follow me in. He was watching from the parking lot. I felt it. The trap. He knew the parking lot was the danger zone. My heart hammered as I grabbed what I needed, my hands shaking so badly I dropped my wallet at self-checkout. I glanced through the automatic doors. There he was, leaning on my car, waiting. I broke. I rushed to the customer service desk, tears brimming over. The young woman at the counter, Kelsey, her name tag said, didn't hesitate. She called the manager, who in turn called the police. I watched through the glass as squad cars pulled in. He bolted, but it was too late. They caught him a few blocks away. They found a loaded gun on him. I sat there numb, as the officers told me if I hadn't spoken up, I might not have left that parking lot alive. Even now, the memory haunts me. I still can't look at a Target parking lot without feeling like I'm being watched, without hearing the buzz of his voice in my head, without wondering if one day he'll get out and finish what he started. I never thought a place like Target could make me feel unsafe. For as long as I can remember, it's been my go-to spot for just about everything. It's funny. I always joked that if I needed milk, makeup, and a new lamp, Target was the place to be. Living in the smaller city of Clayton Falls, there weren't many options anyway. Sure, we had a Walmart on the other side of town, but something about Target always felt cleaner, more organized, less chaotic. It was my comfort zone. I worked second shift at a call center downtown, and by the time I clocked out at 10 p.m., most places were closed or closing. Target was one of the few that stayed open till midnight, which made it perfect for late-night errands. In fact, late-night Target runs had kind of become part of my routine. There was something peaceful about roaming the quiet aisles when the store was nearly empty. No crowds, no lines, just the soft hum of the lights and the occasional distant beep of a register. That's why what happened still feels so unreal to me. Target wasn't supposed to be scary. It started on an ordinary Tuesday. I remember it well because it had been an especially long day. The kind where customers seemed angrier, the clock moved slower, and by the time I got off work, I was too wired to go straight home. I figured I'd swing by Target, pick up some groceries, maybe a few snacks for the week, and just decompress while strolling the aisles. It was around 10:45 p.m. when I pulled into the familiar lot. The parking area was half empty, the overhead lights casting pools of yellow that flickered slightly. I parked in my usual spot, a row or two from the entrance, close enough to feel safe, but far enough that I wouldn't feel boxed in. Inside, the store was as quiet as I expected. A few employees were restocking shelves, and a couple of other late-night shoppers wandered about, pushing half-empty carts. I grabbed a cart and started my loop. Produce first, then pantry, snacks, and finally the refrigerated items. It was always the same pattern. I liked knowing exactly where everything was. It made me feel in control. But that night, something felt off. And at first I couldn't even put my finger on it. It wasn't the store. The lights were the same. The music was the same. It was the people, or rather, the lack of them. By the time I made it to the back section, the cold foods, the place felt almost too empty. Even the employees I'd seen earlier seemed to have disappeared. As I pushed my cart past the frozen pizzas, I heard it. A soft thud, like something shifting behind the metal shelving. I froze. At first I brushed it off. Maybe an employee restocking from the back? It wouldn't have been unusual. But then I saw it. Movement. Between the cracks in the shelving, where the frozen cases backed up against the storage area, I caught the briefest glimpse of something. A figure. Someone was back there. I leaned forward, peering through the narrow space between the racks. It wasn't a Target employee. No red shirt, no khakis. Instead, black. All black. And then, the unmistakable detail that made my stomach knot. A ski mask. At first I stood there frozen, telling myself maybe I was wrong. Maybe it was someone doing maintenance work. But then the figure moved again. And this time, it felt deliberate. As I moved further down the aisle, pretending to browse, I noticed the figure was following me, keeping pace from behind the shelving. My heart hammered in my chest. This wasn't normal. This wasn't safe. Trying to act casual, I grabbed a random item, a frozen meal, and started heading toward the next aisle, keeping my head down. But the figure didn't stop. Now I could see more of him through the gaps. The ski mask, the black hoodie, the gloves. He was watching me, tracking me. When I reached the end of the aisle, I didn't even look back. I ditched my cart right there and made a beeline for the nearest employee I could find, who was stocking cosmetics. "Excuse me," I said, trying to keep my voice from shaking. There's someone behind the freezer aisle, dressed all in black. I don't think they work here." The girl, her name tag said Leah, blinked at me, clearly startled. "What? Like, behind the freezers?" "Yes. He's wearing a mask. He was following me." Leah hesitated, glanced toward the back of the store, then nodded quickly. "Okay. Stay here. I'll check it out." She grabbed her walkie-talkie and disappeared through the double doors leading to the stockroom. I stood there, heart still racing, staring down the empty aisles. Minutes passed. Finally, Leah returned, looking confused. "There's no one back there," she said. "I checked the freezer section and the stockroom. It's empty." I knew what she was going to say next. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe it was a worker I just didn't recognize. But I knew what I saw. Still, I nodded, pretending to accept the answer. I grabbed a few essentials from the front of the store and checked out quickly. When I left the store that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that eyes were still on me. It would have been easy to write it off as paranoia. Maybe I had imagined it after a stressful day. But the following week proved that wasn't the case. It was late again. Same target, same routine. Except this time, when I pulled out of the parking lot, I saw him, standing half-hidden behind the shrubs near the loading dock, dressed in black, the ski mask still on. He popped out just enough that I could see his face, or what little of it the mask allowed, and he looked right at me. I drove past him, pretending not to notice, but my skin crawled the entire way home. And that wasn't the end of it. The third incident is what finally broke me. Same routine, same parking lot. I parked halfway down, surrounded by a few other cars. When I returned to my car with my groceries, I noticed the white sedan parked next to me. It looked empty, until it wasn't. As I loaded my bags into the trunk, I saw movement inside the sedan. A figure, again, all black ski mask, emerged from the back seat, crawling into the passenger side. Our eyes met through the glass. He opened his door. I froze, completely paralyzed by fear. He stepped out, walked straight toward my door, and tried the handle. Reflex finally kicked in, and I hit the lock switch just as he grabbed at it. He pressed his face against my window, staring at me from inches away. I screamed at him to leave. He didn't. I shoved the car into reverse, gunning it backward, the masked man clinging to the side for a few terrifying seconds before letting go. I didn't stop. I drove hard out of the lot, pulled into a nearby gas station, lights off, and waited. Sure enough, a few minutes later, the same sedan peeled out of the Target lot, speeding down the road past me. I haven't been back to that Target since. I don't know who he is, or why he's there. But the last 3 times I went, he was waiting. And now, even in other parking lots, I find myself checking every white sedan, every shadow behind the shelves. I worked at the local department store, a fairly quiet place for most of the week, nestled just a few blocks from my apartment. It wasn't the kind of job that most people would consider exciting, but for me, it was perfect. I had the luxury of being close to home, a steady paycheck, and a relatively laid-back environment where I could get to know my coworkers and feel comfortable. The store was a mid-sized retail location that handled a variety of goods, but my main focus was always the clothing department. I spent most of my time in the women's section, folding shirts, organizing hangers, and helping customers who were looking for something specific. It wasn't a particularly stressful job, at least not in comparison to the chaos I'd witnessed in other areas like electronics or grocery. But working there, I found solace in the rhythm of folding and straightening, in the small conversations with regular customers and the camaraderie with my coworkers. By the time this story takes place, I had been working there for almost 4 months. My routine was set. I was getting comfortable with the work, getting to know the store's quirks, and even had a group of friends who were also on staff. The shifts weren't bad, and I usually felt pretty safe, despite the occasional odd customer interaction. One of those days started like any other. I was alone in the women's clothing section, standing near the jeans racks, trying to organize the mess of misplaced items. The store was relatively quiet. There were a few customers milling about, but nothing out of the ordinary. I hadn't seen anything to cause concern. That's when he approached. The man was tall, easily a few inches above 6 feet. I noticed him immediately because he stood out. He wasn't wearing anything unusual, just a standard jacket and jeans. But there was something about his posture that felt off. His movements were deliberate, almost like he was walking through the store with a purpose. I assumed, like most customers, that he was just looking for something specific. But when he got closer, he gave me a smile, one that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Excuse me," he said, his voice low and smooth. I greeted him with my usual retail smile. "Hi, how can I help you today?" For a moment, he just stood there staring at me, that strange grin still on his face. It was unsettling to say the least. Then, without any preamble, he said, "You can help me by going out with me tonight." I blinked, taken aback. I didn't know how to respond immediately, but I managed to force a chuckle, trying to brush it off as one of those awkward moments. "Oh, I'm sorry, I have a boyfriend," I said quickly, hoping that would be the end of it. It was my go-to response when things got uncomfortable. But his reaction wasn't typical. "No, you don't," he replied, his voice matter-of-fact, as though he knew something I didn't. I felt a slight unease creeping in. "I really do," I said, a little more firmly this time. "Is there something you need help with?" That's when he said something that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. "Yeah, I need directions to your house." I let out a nervous laugh, hoping it was a joke. "Sorry, I really need to get back to work," I said, trying to walk away. but he didn't let up. Instead, he followed me. I wasn't sure if he was just being persistent or if there was something more sinister going on. I stopped walking and turned to face him, the awkwardness of the situation escalating quickly. "Why are you following me?" I asked, feeling a little bolder now, my pulse quickening. "You're kind of creeping me out." He raised his hands in mock surrender. "My bad," he said, stepping back. I took a deep breath, relieved that I was able to get him to back off. At least, that's what I thought. I resumed my work, hoping the encounter would just fade into the background. But as I started moving to a different part of the clothing department, I noticed him again. He was standing a few aisles away, watching me. Not in the casual way you'd expect someone to glance over while shopping, but in a way that made me feel like I was being observed, analyzed. I moved to a different part of the store to shake him off, hoping that would be the end of it. But when I glanced over a few minutes later, I saw him again walking through the aisles, looking at me like he was on a hunt. It was starting to get to me. I needed a break. I radioed into my supervisor to let them know I was taking a break, then walked towards the front of the store, hoping the man would lose interest. I took my time in the break room, sitting in a quiet corner, trying to calm my nerves. But the oddness of the situation lingered. Had I imagined it? Had he really been following me? I figured it was a fluke. When I returned to the floor after my break, I didn't see him. For the next couple of hours, I focused on my work, my mind always lingering on the idea that he might still be lurking somewhere. But by the time my shift ended, I thought I had dodged the bullet. I left work that night feeling somewhat relieved, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. The following week, I went back to work like usual. The store was quieter now, as it was late evening. I was working on some clothing displays near the back of the store when I heard a voice crackle through my walkie-talkie. It wasn't my supervisor, it wasn't anyone I recognized. They asked for me by name. This wasn't completely unusual. We had a lot of new staff members, and sometimes I didn't recognize voices right away. But when the person on the other end asked me to switch to Channel 3, I did so without thinking. Channel 3 was reserved for more private communication, direct instructions, things that needed to be handled quickly. "I need you in receiving," the voice said flatly. "Now." Receiving. That was the back of the store where deliveries came in. I had only been back there a handful of times, and it wasn't a place I usually worked. But when I got the message, I didn't question it. I headed for the back. It was eerily quiet back there as always. The lights were dim, and the store's noise felt muffled as I stepped outside into the back area. I was about to radio in when I heard something odd, a faint echo of my own voice coming through someone else's walkie-talkie. I froze, confusion making my stomach tighten. "Hello?" I called out. No answer. I started walking toward the sound, which was coming from behind one of the shelves near the entrance to the outside. That's when I saw him. The same man from before, the one who had followed me earlier. He was standing behind a shelf, just barely visible, staring at me. My heart pounded. This couldn't be happening again. He was too close, too familiar. Did you call me?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. Without responding, he stepped out from behind the shelf, his tall figure looming over me. My breath hitched. "Please don't come any closer," I managed, backing away, my mind racing. There was no way this could be happening. He ignored me, his pace slow and calculated. When he was close enough, he grabbed my arm, pulling me toward him with alarming force. I panicked, I screamed, but the noise was drowned out by the empty space around us. Just then, I saw a flash of movement from the corner of my eye. My coworker, Amy, appeared in the doorway. She was walking in with a puzzled expression. "What's going on?" she asked. The man let go of me and sprinted for the door, disappearing into the dark parking lot before I could even process what had just happened. Amy rushed over to me asking if I was okay. I quickly explained what had happened, though the words didn't feel like they were enough to describe the terror I had just experienced. We immediately called the police. It wasn't long before they showed up, but by then, the man was long gone. They explained that it wasn't hard for him to pick up a walkie-talkie on the same frequency as ours. The entire situation sent a chill down my spine. I continued working at the store for several weeks after that. It took a while to get over the feeling of being watched, but eventually, the fear began to fade. The man never returned, and I never saw him again. Still, sometimes when I'm walking alone at night, I catch myself glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see him standing in the shadows, watching, waiting. But I never do. Not yet. I never considered myself an overly anxious person, but October 2016 challenged that assumption in ways I still can't fully process. Back then, my wife and I had been living in a small town called Redfield, just outside Kansas City, Missouri. We had moved there for her nursing job after months of hunting for affordable rent. The town wasn't exactly picturesque, more like a cluster of aging neighborhoods anchored around a dying strip mall, a couple of grocery stores, and the one place that was always buzzing no matter what, Target. It was the only place open past 9 p.m. that didn't require driving 20 miles into the city, and it became our default for late-night cravings, forgotten groceries, or in this case, painkillers. My wife Emily was curled up on our old couch, cradling her head like it was splitting open from the inside. "Trevor," she groaned, eyes barely open under the glow of the muted TV. "I need Excedrin or something, please." I checked our sad excuse for a medicine cabinet, half a bottle of children's cold syrup, some Tums, and a crusty tube of ointment. Definitely nothing for migraines. I sighed, rubbed my face, and checked the clock. 9:17 p.m. Target was only a 7-minute walk, but October in Redfield had felt different. The so-called clown panic wasn't just an internet rumor anymore. Every day, local Facebook groups exploded with stories. People seeing clowns stalking parking lots, standing in yards at midnight, or hiding in the woods on the edges of town. A few weeks back, Emily showed me a blurry photo someone posted. It was a figure in an oversized clown suit holding what looked like a hatchet, standing behind the old factory by the highway. Probably some punk teenager screwing around, I had told her. But even I didn't entirely believe it. The fear had burrowed into the town's collective mind. Even the schools sent emails urging parents to avoid letting kids walk home alone after dark. Emily groaned again, snapping me out of my spiral. I hated the thought of walking outside with those stories swirling in my head, but our car, our one and only car, had been sitting in the garage untouched for weeks thanks to my job transition. The battery was dead as a doornail, and we hadn't gotten around to replacing it yet. I could have tried downloading Uber or Lyft, but truthfully, I didn't want to explain to some driver why I was too scared to walk 7 minutes to Target. My pride outweighed my common sense. I grabbed my hoodie, tucked the hood up, and told myself I was being ridiculous. It was a short walk. A straight shot down Maple Avenue, past the old Baptist church, then through a shortcut across the back of the Oak Ridge Preserve, a tiny sliver of woods people used to walk their dogs during the day, but nobody dared go into at night anymore. Of course, I wasn't going to take the shortcut. Even in daylight, it gave me the creeps. The air outside felt heavier than normal, like the sky was sagging under the weight of those thick, low clouds. Streetlights flickered weakly, and every driveway looked like a black hole. I kept my head down, hands jammed in my hoodie pocket, pretending everything was fine. But the streets were dead silent. Even the sounds of insects and frogs seemed muted. I told myself, don't act scared. Don't look paranoid. If someone's out here, don't give them the satisfaction. But a few blocks in, the sound of soft, high-pitched giggling drifted from the darkness. I froze. It was faint, like a distant recording, but it was unmistakably human. I clenched my fists, my brain screaming, ignore it. Walk. It's nothing. Some kids being idiots. But then I heard it again. Closer this time. I picked up the pace, forcing my steps to sound even, controlled. My ears strained to catch any sound that didn't belong. But all I could hear now was the blood pounding in my head. That's when I saw him. A flicker of white in the trees lining the sidewalk. A flash of red hair. I stole a glance, and that's when I saw the grin. Wide, painted, unreal. And worse, the silver glint of a machete held loosely in his gloved hand like it was a toy. I didn't wait to see what he'd do next. My calm facade shattered as I broke into a full sprint toward the red glow of the Target sign down the block. "Hey, where you going, man?" His voice was sing-songy, playful, like this was some game. I heard his footsteps pounding behind me, heavy, unhurried at first, then suddenly accelerating. "Run, little piggy!" I gasped, legs burning, lungs on fire, running harder than I ever had in my life. The plastic grin was burned into my mind, and I swore I could feel the whoosh of the machete slicing air behind me. When I reached the sliding doors of Target, they opened just in time for me to crash through them, collapsing onto the cold tile floor, gasping, sweating, shaking. The fluorescent lights inside felt like salvation, but when I scrambled to my feet and spun around, there was nothing there. No clown, no footsteps, nothing but the empty parking lot under the flickering lights. I stumbled toward the customer service counter, my voice a croak. There's someone chasing me. Clown, machete." People stared, blank faces. A few customers smirked. Employees looked more annoyed than anything. "Sir, calm down," said a girl in a red vest, her name tag reading Kayla, looking all of 19. "There's nobody out there." "I swear he was right behind me," I stammered. "Can someone just check?" "Please?" Kayla exchanged a look with another guy, an older man who I guessed was the closing manager. He sighed, like I was ruining his night. "Sure, I'll walk out there with you." We stepped outside together. The air was still. The lot was empty. "You see anybody?" he asked, hands on his hips. "No." My voice wavered, but I swear he was right behind me. The manager clapped me on the back like he was trying to knock the fear out of me. "Probably just some jackass in a costume screwing with you, buddy. It's been happening all over the place. Go grab your stuff and head home." But I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was still watching. I spent nearly an hour inside, pacing the aisles, pretending to shop even though I already had the Excedrin in my basket. I couldn't make myself go back outside. Eventually, when the closing announcements blared over the intercom, I gave in, downloaded the Uber app, and ordered a ride. The driver, an older woman named Marcia, didn't say a word when she saw the pickup and drop-off addresses were practically on the same street. As we drove past the preserve where it all started, I glanced out the window and froze. There, half hidden in the shadows by the tree line, stood the clown. Same wide smile, same machete. Watching the car roll by. I didn't say anything to Marcia. I couldn't even speak. But I never walked that street again. I never even parked near that side of the Target after that. Months later, I heard Target corporate stopped selling clown masks. Apparently, too many people were complaining about incidents and they didn't want the liability. But the damage was already done. People like me learned something that October. Some smiles hide real monsters, and not all of them wait for you in your dreams. Some are waiting in the shadows of your own quiet street. It was nearing 10:30 p.m., and the Target parking lot was quiet. The busy evening rush had already died down, and I was left alone to finish up the last of the cart retrieval. I worked the evening shift at the Westview Target, a super Target located in a large retail complex at the edge of the city. It was a busy area during the day, with people constantly coming and going from the nearby restaurants, fast food joints, and gas stations. But by this hour, most of the shoppers had already gone home, leaving the lot half empty. I'd been working at this Target for over a year, and cart pushing was one of the more solitary tasks that came with the job. The carts, scattered all over the lot after hours, were usually left in inconvenient places, abandoned haphazardly far from the cart corrals. This gave me plenty of time to walk the lot, gather the carts, and get my steps in for the day. It was monotonous, but in a way, I found peace in the quiet routine. But that night, something was different. It felt off, like I was being watched. I had just picked up a few stray carts from the far end of the parking lot, near the northeast corner. That area was always quieter, tucked away from the main entrance. The wind picked up, making the empty lot feel even lonelier, and I was starting to make my way back when I noticed an SUV pull in. The headlights were blinding for a moment, and I had to shield my eyes. But what struck me was that the SUV didn't drive past like most cars. Instead, it slowed down and came to a stop, not in a parking space, but right in front of me, blocking the aisle. I stopped in my tracks, unsure of what to do. It wasn't uncommon for people to park awkwardly in the lot, especially late at night, but this was unusual. I looked over at the vehicle, seeing a man get out. He wasn't tall, but he had a stocky build, his face obscured by the darkness. The car was running, and the engine's hum added an odd layer of tension to the silence. "Hey!" the man called out. I felt a strange unease coil in my stomach, but I forced myself to be polite. "Yeah? Can I help you?" The man waved me over. "I'm having a problem with my car. It's making this weird noise, and I was hoping you might know something about cars." It seemed harmless enough, but something about his request felt off. I wasn't a mechanic, not by a long shot, but I figured if he just wanted some advice, I could at least take a look. I walked closer, but the closer I got, the more I felt that weird gut feeling telling me this wasn't right. He stepped forward and gestured toward the back seat of the SUV. "If you could just get in, I need you to listen to it while I drive." That's when everything inside me screamed to run. The request was bizarre, and I felt a chill run down my spine. I wasn't an expert in car repairs, but I definitely knew enough to know that getting inside someone's car, especially a stranger's, was a bad idea. My instincts kicked in, and I took a step back. "Actually, I don't know much about cars," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "Sorry, I can't help you with that." I turned on my heel and started walking back to where I'd left the cart, hoping that would be the end of it. But then I heard the man's voice again. "Wait." I picked up my pace, and so did he. His footsteps echoed in the quiet lot, growing louder as he followed me. I didn't know what his intentions were, but everything inside me screamed that I needed to get away. I didn't stop to think about it. I broke into a run, holding the cart as if it were a barrier between me and him. My heart raced in my chest as I sprinted across the lot, the sound of his heavy footsteps growing fainter behind me. I didn't look back. I just ran for the entrance, where the store's automatic doors swished open in front of me, offering the safety I needed. I slid inside, feeling the cool air conditioning wash over me as the doors shut behind me with a satisfying thud. I leaned against the cart rack, trying to steady my breathing. The store was quieter now, most of the evening shift employees having finished their work. I knew the store was busy, but it was always calm inside, especially when the craziness of the day had settled down. I kept my eyes on the doors, waiting to see if the man had followed me inside. But after a few minutes, it seemed like he had disappeared. I figured he had left the parking lot. Maybe he'd just been a harmless oddball, but the fear in my chest wouldn't go away so easily. I didn't want to be alone outside again, not after that. So I spent the next half hour working near the store entrance, as close to the lights and cameras as I could. The lot had started to look emptier. No sign of the man or his SUV. By 11:15, I was ready for my break. I clocked out and made my way to the break room, hoping to relax for a few minutes. The room was empty, and I pulled out my phone, scrolling mindlessly through social media, trying to shake the feeling of dread that had settled in my stomach. There was nothing unusual about the break room, just the dim fluorescent lights buzzing softly overhead. But then, I heard the door open. It was a small sound at first, just a creak of the door opening and closing behind me. I figured it was another employee coming in, maybe for a break or a shift change. But then, the silence stretched, and I turned around. My heart dropped. There he was, the man from the parking lot, standing in the doorway of the break room staring directly at me. His face was just as shadowed as before, but I could tell from the way he stood there that he'd been watching me for a while. His presence made the air feel heavy, suffocating. I froze. My mind raced, my body already pushing itself into motion. I shot out of my chair and bolted for the other door, not bothering to look back. The break room was small, with an exit to the employee area, and I ran straight through it, pushing through the door that led outside. I didn't stop. My heart pounded in my chest as I rounded the corner of the building and dashed back toward the main entrance. I was running on pure adrenaline now, barely thinking, just desperate to put distance between myself and that man. I burst through the doors into the brightly lit store, nearly crashing into a manager at the front. I was gasping for breath, wild-eyed. I told him everything that had happened, the man in the parking lot, the strange request, how I had seen him again in the break room. The manager didn't waste any time. He immediately called security and went to check the break room. But by the time they arrived, the man was gone. The whole night felt like a blur, and I kept glancing over my shoulder as I finished up my shift, still on edge. I stayed as close to the store as I could, not wanting to be caught outside alone again. I punched out, heart still racing, and left the building. When I got home that night, I locked every door, checked every window, and felt the weight of the fear pressing in on me. It was a long time before I felt safe in that parking lot again. I worked at Target for several more months after that night, but nothing ever came close to the terror I felt that evening. That man, whoever he was, never returned, and I never saw his SUV again. But every time I walked out of that store after dark, I couldn't help but feel like someone was still watching me from the shadows. When I think back to that summer, everything felt slower. Maybe because I was just a kid, or maybe because small towns like ours had a way of stretching out time. There wasn't much to do in our neighborhood. The most exciting part of our week was the Saturday trip to the park and Target across the street. For us, that giant red store wasn't just for shopping. It was a playground. I was 10. My little sister, Martha, was about 6 or 7. She had this way of clinging to me like I was some kind of hero, though at the time I barely felt like I could take care of myself. Still, I liked when she looked at me that way. That Saturday started off differently. I woke up to the sound of Mom coughing so hard I thought she might throw up. "Mom!" I peeked into her room. The smell of Vicks vapor rub and sweat hit me. She pulled the blanket over her face and waved her hand at me weakly. "Stay out, Matthew. I caught something. Flu, maybe. I'm not taking you guys out today." Martha appeared behind me, clutching her old stuffed bunny. She looked from me to Mom. "But Mom, the Barbie, remember?" she whined, her face scrunching up. Mom sighed, holding her forehead. "There's money on the counter. I'll call Grandma to take you, okay? Just be good. Stay together. Listen to Grandma." Martha groaned, but didn't argue much after that. About 30 minutes later, Grandma's old beige Buick rolled up the driveway, rattling like it might fall apart. She honked twice, her way of saying, "Hurry up, kids." "Bye, Mom," I shouted, grabbing the wrinkled $20 bill off the kitchen counter. Mom mumbled something I couldn't make out. Probably be safe. The ride to the park was filled with Grandma's old stories about how sodas used to cost a dime and how she and Grandpa met at a roller rink. Martha rolled her eyes. "Grandma, that was like in dinosaur times." I laughed. Grandma just smiled and shook her head. The park was crowded like always on weekends. Kids darted around, families laid out on blankets. The air smelled like sunblock and grass. Martha sprinted toward the swings, squealing, "Last one, there's a rotten egg." We played for what felt like forever, and honestly, I started to get bored. I wanted a soda, maybe chips too. "Grandma, can we go to Target now?" I asked, kicking dirt at the toe of my shoe. She adjusted her glasses and looked up from her book. "In a bit, Matthew. My friend Shirley's coming. We'll go after, okay?" Martha, of course, started her whole act, kicking dirt, whining, tugging on Grandma's sweater. Please, 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 Grandma. It's right there. We can go by ourselves. Matthew will hold my hand the whole time. Grandma looked at me. You sure you can handle her? I nodded, puffing up a little. Yeah, we'll stay together. Promise. All right. Straight to the toy aisle and back to me, okay? Inside Target, it felt like a different world. Cold air blasting from the vents, floors shiny enough to see your face, aisles stretching like mazes. I gripped Martha's hand tight. Don't run off, okay? But the moment we hit the toy section, she broke free, her tiny legs carrying her toward the Barbie display. Look at all of them, she beamed, her voice echoing down the empty aisle. I'm gonna get this one, and on my birthday this one. Martha, pick one, please. I groaned. I want my soda. She pointed up at a Barbie in a ridiculous blue dress. Of course, the highest shelf. I can't reach that, dummy, I muttered, trying to jump, looking like an idiot. That's when I heard the voice. Need some help with that? I froze. The voice was high, almost too high, like someone pretending. I turned and saw her, or what I thought was a her. She was weird, tall, too much makeup caked on her face, red lipstick smudged on the edges like old ketchup. Her smile, it was wide but didn't reach her eyes. Martha, oblivious as always, pointed at the Barbie. Can you get that one, please? The woman leaned closer, reaching over me. Her arms were big, hairy even, but she kept that weird smile plastered on her face. There you go, sweetheart, she said, handing Martha the doll. Then, turning to me, you're quiet. What's your name, sweetie? I didn't like how she was looking at us. My gut twisted. Matthew. That's my sister Martha. Oh, adorable, she cooed. You know, I've got lots of dolls in my van. More than they got here. Want to see? You can pick as many as you want. Free something about the way she said van made my skin crawl. No thanks. Grandma's waiting outside. She'll be here any minute. Her smile twitched. For a second, her face went blank, like I said something wrong. Then, she forced the smile back. Oh, you're not alone, I see. She lingered too long, staring at us. I grabbed Martha's hand. We gotta go. Thanks for helping. We hurried off. I glanced back once. She was still there, watching. At the register, I realized I forgot my soda. Stay here, okay? Don't move, I'll be back. I bolted, grabbing the soda from the fridge aisle. When I came back, Martha wasn't there. Where's Martha? Grandma's voice came from behind me, making me jump. She's right here. My voice cracked. But she wasn't. She was gone. We both panicked. Employees joined in. Announcements blasted over the speakers. No sign of her. Then I remembered the woman. The van. I told the police everything. They found her, in the van, along with 2 other girls. What they told us later haunted me for years. That wasn't a woman. It was a man, wearing his dead wife's face like a mask. They said his wife used to help lure kids, but when she tried to back out, he killed her, wore her like a costume. That day, that Barbie doll, it could have been the last thing my sister ever saw. Martha was lucky. That's what everyone kept saying. But lucky didn't feel like the right word. Not when I still woke up at night, hearing that that man's voice in my head. That fake, sugary voice. The police told us Martha had been found in the back of the van, dazed, clutching the Barbie doll he gave her. They said she was okay. Physically, maybe. But after that day, she stopped talking for weeks. Wouldn't go near stores. Wouldn't even let Mom out of her sight. And me? I blamed myself. I was supposed to watch her. I told Grandma I could handle it. But I couldn't. The news covered it for a while. Everyone in town knew what happened. For weeks, people gave us pitiful looks at the grocery store, at church, everywhere. And then, life just kind of moved on. People forgot. But we didn't. Martha started therapy. I did too, though I hated every second of it. They caught him, of course. Turns out he wasn't from around here. He traveled between small towns pretending to be a woman, preying on kids in big box stores. His trial was quiet. No big courtroom drama like in movies. He pled guilty. We never saw him again. But it wasn't like the movies, where everything goes back to normal once the bad guy is caught. Mom still double-checked every lock every night. Martha still slept with the lights on. I still flinched when strangers smiled at me too long. We still went to Target sometimes, but never to that one. Mom drove to the other side of town, and whenever I saw a woman in bright red lipstick, I couldn't help it. My stomach would twist. Sometimes I wondered, if I hadn't come back in time, if I hadn't remembered the van, would Martha still be with us? I tried not to think about it, but some nights when the house got too quiet, I did. I had been looking forward to that Friday night all week. It had been one of those dragging, soul-crushing weeks at work, where every day blurred into the next. I worked customer service at a credit union, and it was the end of the month, which meant back-to-back complaints about overdraft fees, angry members yelling over things they didn't understand, and a manager who kept breathing down my neck about upselling new accounts. My patience was thin, my head pounded from the never-ending fluorescent lights, and to make matters worse, my period had hit that morning like a freight train. I had planned to sink into my couch, crank up some mindless reality TV, and lose myself in greasy pizza and heating pads. But around 9:15 p.m., as I dug through the bottom of my bathroom cabinet, I realized I was down to exactly one tampon. I sat there on the edge of the bathtub for a long minute, debating whether I could make it until morning. But tomorrow was booked. My friend Kayla was dragging me to some yoga class at 8 a.m., followed by brunch with her new boyfriend, some finance bro I already disliked based on his LinkedIn profile. So, like it or not, I had to get up and go out. I grabbed my keys, tugged on a hoodie over my pajamas, and headed to Sundown Supercenter, a big box chain store on the outskirts of Maple Hollow. Not quite Target, not quite Walmart. It was the type of place you only went to when you forgot something basic at 9 p.m. The parking lot was almost empty when I pulled in, just a few scattered cars, and the overhead lights buzzed in that creepy, half-broken way that made everything feel like a scene from a bad horror movie. I parked in the second row, under one of the few working lamps, and muttered to myself, in and out. 5 minutes. Inside, the place was even more depressing. The shelves looked half-stocked, like they hadn't bothered to restock since the afternoon rush. A bored-looking teenage cashier leaned against her station, scrolling on her phone. The only other people in sight were an elderly couple arguing over cat food and a guy in a greasy hoodie digging through the clearance bin. I shivered a little, but told myself it was just the cold blast of overcompensating air conditioning. I made my way straight to the feminine hygiene aisle, past rows of dusty seasonal decor and a sad end cap of expired Easter candy. The store felt too quiet. No music, no chatter, just the hollow echo of my sneakers on the linoleum floor. I was kneeling to grab my usual brand of tampons when I noticed him. He was standing about 15 feet away, staring at the shelves like he was trying to decipher them. At first glance, nothing about him screamed danger. Late 30s, maybe 40, ball cap pulled low over thinning hair, baggy jeans, a zip-up jacket that was too heavy for spring. But something felt off. The way he wasn't actually looking at the products, more like scanning the aisle itself. My stomach tightened. Maybe he was here for his wife or girlfriend, sure. Maybe he was lost. But he didn't have anything in his hands. No basket, no list. Just loitering. I ignored him, grabbed the box, and quickly walked toward the toothpaste aisle. I told myself I was overreacting. I do that sometimes. My therapist says it's because of the mugging I went through in college that I tend to see red flags even when they're barely pink. But when I caught sight of him again, 3 aisles over, pretending to browse razors, my heart rate spiked. He was definitely following me. I clutched the box of toothpaste tighter than I needed to and darted down the deodorant aisle, watching out of the corner of my eye. He followed, Not close enough to touch, but close enough to make his presence known. My brain scrambled for logic. Maybe he was loss prevention. Maybe I looked sketchy in my hoodie and pajama pants. But if that was the case, why didn't he just approach me? Why follow so obviously? I debated leaving everything and just walking out. But part of me, the same part that always wanted to believe people weren't as bad as the world made them out to be, hesitated. Maybe I was overthinking. To test it, I zigzagged through several random aisles, home goods, vitamins, paper towels. Each time, a few seconds later, he appeared, pretending to look at nothing. My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't coincidence. I forced myself to stay calm even as my palms turned clammy around the toothpaste box. I made a beeline for the checkout, heart pounding louder than my footsteps. The same cashier was still glued to her phone, barely glancing up as I approached. "Hi, how's your night going?" I asked, my voice tight and fake cheerful. She blinked at me, surprised I was talking. Slow. "Hey, random question. Does your store have security? Like, in the building?" She blinked again. Sometimes. They do rounds." "Why?" I leaned in, lowering my voice. "There's a man following me around. I think he's waiting for me to leave." The girl finally straightened up, frowning. "Where?" I didn't want to point and tip him off, but I risked a quick glance over my shoulder. But he was gone. My skin prickled. I shoved my card at the girl, rushing through the payment as fast as possible. She mumbled something about paging a manager, but I didn't wait. I headed straight to the doors, telling myself maybe I'd imagined the whole thing. Maybe he'd already left. But when I stepped outside into the dark parking lot, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. Something wasn't right. I walked faster, clutching my keys like a weapon, thumb on the panic button. The parking lot was still empty, eerily so. I was almost at my car when I heard it, a quick, shuffling footstep behind me. I spun around. No one. I turned back to unlock my car. That's when I felt the arms wrap around me. A ragged gasp escaped me as I was yanked backward, the figure overpowering me easily. I screamed, kicked, twisted, but I was no match for his size or strength. He slammed me against the side of my own car, forcing me inside, pinning my arms as he shoved me across the passenger seat. The stench of sweat and old cigarettes filled my nostrils. He climbed in after me, snatching the keys from my fumbling hand. It was him, the man from the store. He grinned at me, breath foul, muttering, "Quiet down, sweetheart. You don't want to make this worse." I screamed anyway, loud, desperate. For a second I thought it was useless. But then, out of nowhere, another figure appeared, a man in a blue hoodie, slamming open the driver's side door, yanking the attacker out into the cold night. They fought, fists flying, grunts echoing across the lot. I scrambled upright, shaking, crying, fumbling the lock button. Click. I locked the doors. My body shook so badly I almost dropped my phone as I dialed 911. The fight outside ended as abruptly as it started. The attacker broke free and sprinted off into the shadows, disappearing beyond the broken lights. When the police came, I could barely string together words. They reviewed the store cameras, asked me 100 questions, brought out the store manager, who looked like she wanted to be anywhere else but there. Turns out the man had been lurking inside the store for hours, following multiple women. I wasn't his first target tonight, maybe not his last. What chilled me to the bone, though, was what the cops told me afterward. His face matched the description of a man wanted in the next county over, suspected in the murder of a woman last month. I sat in the back of the squad car, wrapped in a scratchy blanket, staring at the reflection of my haunted face in the side mirror. All I could think was, would I have been next? I always thought working the closing shift at Target would be uneventful. Boring, sure. Repetitive, absolutely. But dangerous? Never crossed my mind. It was late October, The store still decorated with plastic pumpkins and oversized cobwebs, even though the holiday was a week away. I worked in the general merchandise section, mostly folding clothes that nobody ever put back right, organizing end caps, and cleaning up spills in the home section. That night felt like any other. The cold Nebraska wind rattled the front windows, reminding me how empty the parking lot was this late at night. We closed at 10 p.m., and it was already 9:37. Most customers had cleared out, except a few stragglers. I glanced at my watch and sighed. 23 minutes. Then I could clock out, drive home, eat leftovers, and curl up under my heated blanket. But something was off. It started when I saw the man. He wasn't anyone I recognized, and I'd been here long enough to know most of the regulars. Tall, thin, wearing a faded gray hoodie with the hood up, even though the store was warm inside. His jeans looked dirty, stiff, like he'd been wearing them for days. He was just standing at the end of the cleaning aisle, arms at his sides, staring straight ahead at nothing. He wasn't looking at products. He wasn't holding a cart or basket. He wasn't shopping. I watched him for a minute from the end of the main aisle, half hidden behind a display of discounted candles. He didn't move, didn't blink, as far as I could tell. I swallowed hard. Maybe he was waiting for someone. Lost? High? Either way, it gave me a chill. "Hey, you good, Clara?" I jumped a little. It was Devin, the shift supervisor. He was balancing a stack of cardboard boxes on one hip while sipping from a Red Bull. His tired eyes followed my gaze to the man. I forced a smile. "Yeah, just someone hanging around and cleaning. He's been standing there a while." Devin squinted. "Weird. You want me to say something?" I shook my head, not wanting to cause a scene over what could just be a harmless weirdo. Nah, probably just waiting for someone. But when I glanced back, the man was gone. I blinked hard. Where the hell did he go? The aisle was long and straight, no exits, no nearby bathrooms. A prickle of unease crawled up my neck. I told myself maybe he just turned into an adjacent aisle while I was distracted. It didn't really make sense, but I forced myself to shrug it off. Retail workers see strange people all the time. It's part of the gig. The next time I saw him, it was by the electronics counter. I had moved over there to tidy the phone accessories, trying to forget the earlier moment, when I noticed him again. This time he was closer, standing right by the counter, staring at the locked cases of prepaid phones. But he wasn't browsing. He wasn't even pretending. He was standing stiff, almost unnaturally still, his head tilted like he was studying something far away. I felt my pulse quicken. This wasn't right. I glanced over at Marcus, the night electronics associate, but he wasn't at his station. Just me and the man. I made a decision. I wasn't going to let some creep ruin my night. I walked up to him, forcing my best customer service smile. "Hey there, sir. We'll be closing in about 20 minutes. Can I help you find anything before then?" He didn't react. I cleared my throat, louder this time. "Sir?" Slowly, he turned his head toward me. His eyes were sunken, wide, unblinking. They looked wrong. Like he wasn't looking at me at all, but through me. He smiled, a slow, crooked thing that never touched his eyes. And then in a voice barely above a whisper, "Are you the only one left?" My heart skipped a beat. "Excuse me?" He didn't repeat himself. Instead, he turned and walked away, disappearing behind the seasonal aisle. I stood frozen. What the hell? I quickly walked over to the security podium where Paul, the overnight security guy, was watching the cameras. "Hey, Paul. There's a guy acting super weird over by electronics. Can you keep an eye on him?" Paul, an ex-cop who took his job way too seriously, leaned into his monitor. "You got a description?" I rattled off the details. Paul nodded, flipping through the camera feeds. "I see him. Gray hoodie, right? He's moving toward the back now." I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. At least someone else saw him. Maybe he was just some drifter looking for shelter. It wouldn't be the first time. Paul adjusted his chair, cracking his knuckles. "I'll walk the floor, see what he's up to. You good?" I nodded, but my hands were shaking. Why was I so rattled? People loitered all the time. But something about him, it felt wrong. Like I wasn't just seeing a creepy dude, but something I couldn't name yet. Something worse. I tried to shake it off by throwing myself back into work. Clothing returns, folding displays, checking that the dressing rooms were empty, but the sense of dread followed me like a shadow. At 9:55 p.m., the closing announcement played over the speakers. Devin and the others gathered near the front, ready to lock up as soon as the last customers checked out. But when I counted heads, I realized something. Where was Hoodie Guy? Where were the other customers? Where was Paul? The store felt empty. Too empty. Devin looked at me funny. "You okay? You look pale." I swallowed hard. "Paul's still on the floor, right?" He frowned. "Should be. You want me to radio him?" But when he picked up the radio and called Paul, there was no answer. Silence. Dead air. Devin tried again. Still nothing. A creeping sense of panic gripped me. I pulled out my phone and checked the security app Paul used to monitor the floor. The feeds were static. All of them. Even the front entrance. "That doesn't make sense," Devin muttered, his brows furrowing. "Those cameras never go down all at once." That's when the lights in the seasonal aisle flickered, then went out. We both froze. "Is that a breaker thing?" I asked, but my voice cracked. Devin shook his head slowly. "Number only that aisle? That's not how they're wired." He grabbed the radio again. "Paul, report to the front immediately. This isn't funny." Nothing. I took a few steps toward the seasonal aisle. It was pitch black. I couldn't even see the candy displays at the edge, just nothing. And then, from the dark, footsteps. Fast, running footsteps, coming straight toward us. I screamed. Devin stumbled back, dropping the radio. We both watched as Paul came sprinting out of the darkness. He was out of breath, his face pale as a sheet. Sweat poured down his face. "We need to lock the store, now." "Paul, what the hell is going on?" Devin demanded. But Paul only shook his head, gripping his flashlight so tight his knuckles turned white. He's not right, I saw him, he's not human." I'd worked at the Target in the quiet suburbs of Maplewood for over 2 years. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid the bills, and the night shift was mostly uneventful. Most nights I had the entire store to myself, with only a handful of customers browsing in the late hours. It was always quiet, a little eerie, but that's how I liked it. The mundane routine gave me a strange comfort, and I could usually coast through the shift without much hassle. This particular night, though, felt different. The air was thick with the promise of a storm. Heavy clouds had been looming all day, and as the evening wore on, the wind began to pick up. The store was eerily quiet. It was close to closing time, just after 11 p.m. The typical late-night crowd had already trickled out, leaving behind only a few stragglers, myself included. My attention was drawn to a girl standing near the checkout counter. She was pacing back and forth, her eyes darting around the nearly empty store as though she was looking for something, or someone. She had an air of discomfort about her, the kind of unease that I instantly recognized. As someone who worked nights, I'd seen it plenty of times. People get nervous when they're out at odd hours, especially when they're alone. But her anxiety felt different, like there was more to it than just being in a quiet store late at night. She was dressed in a flower print skirt and a simple red tank top, her blonde hair pulled into a messy ponytail. I couldn't help but notice how beautiful she was. But it was her expression, the way her eyes flitted around nervously, that told the real story. She was afraid, I could tell that much. At the counter, an older man stood checking out a couple of items. His eyes kept flicking toward the girl, lingering a little too long for my liking. He was tall, maybe in his early 50s, with a sharp, angular face. His uniform was neat, but there was something unsettling about his demeanor. When the couple at the counter left, the girl quickly pushed her cart toward the aisles, clearly trying to get away from the counter. I could see the conflict in her eyes. She wanted to leave, but was hesitant. There was something odd about the way she carried herself, like she didn't want to draw attention to herself, but also didn't want to leave without getting what she came for. I debated whether I should just mind my business and finish my shopping, but something about the situation kept nagging at me. It wasn't right. She wasn't just uncomfortable. She was scared. I decided to approach her. "Hey, is everything all right?" I asked softly, making sure not to startle her. She turned, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of relief pass through her expression. "Yeah," she said, her voice tight. "I just forgot to grab some snacks." I nodded, but I wasn't convinced. She was lying, or at least avoiding the real reason for her unease. I didn't want to leave her alone with that creepy guy at the counter. There was something about him I didn't trust. "Care for billing?" he asked from the counter, his voice a little too rough for my liking. "No, I'll wait for her to come back," I said, turning my back on him, feeling his eyes linger on me now. I could almost hear his frustration, the way he wanted to be rid of me. The girl didn't come back after several minutes. I waited, checking the time. 10 minutes had passed and I was starting to get antsy. It wasn't like her to just disappear. Maybe she had left, but I wasn't so sure. I decided to look for her. I pushed my cart toward the snack aisle where she had said she was going, but found no sign of her. The store was unusually quiet now, the air thick with tension. I walked through the empty aisles, peeking into the other sections. No girl, no cart. The aisles felt endless, and the hum of the lights overhead seemed louder than usual. Where could she have gone? I wondered if she had left through the back exit, maybe afraid of something or someone. The thought of her walking alone in the stormy night sent a chill down my spine. Suddenly, I spotted her cart at the end of the aisle, parked carelessly. But there was no sign of her. I turned to the other aisles, scanning every corner, every row, but she was nowhere to be found. "Hello?" I called out, my voice echoing eerily in the silence. No answer. A distant rumble of thunder vibrated through the walls of the store, and I glanced outside. It was raining heavily now, and the winds had picked up. A storm was definitely on its way. I glanced at my phone. No service. Of course, that wasn't unusual for this part of town. The signal was always spotty, especially during bad weather. I hesitated, unsure what to do next. The last thing I wanted was to get caught up in some bizarre situation. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. So I kept looking. As I turned the corner toward the front of the store, the lights flickered. A loud crash of thunder echoed overhead, and in that moment the power cut out. The entire store was plunged into darkness. "Hello?" I called again, my voice unnervingly loud in the silence. My phone was useless now, so I fumbled for my flashlight. I turned it on, casting a dim light around the store. My breath caught in my throat when I heard a soft, terrified whimper from behind me. I spun around, shining the flashlight toward the sound, and saw her, standing just a few feet away. The girl. She was drenched in sweat, her eyes wide with panic. She looked like she had seen a ghost. "He locked us inside," she whispered, her voice shaking. I blinked, confused. "What? Who?" "The man at the counter. He's a freak. He had a gun. I've seen it." I felt my heart drop into my stomach. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to process her words. I looked back toward the counter, then at her. "We need to get out of here," she whispered. "He's coming for us." I had no idea what she was talking about. What the hell was going on? I had seen the man, but he didn't seem dangerous. Then again, I wasn't about to dismiss what she said. "Let's check the front door," I suggested, trying to stay calm. "Maybe we can open it. We need to get out of here and call the cops." She nodded, her eyes filled with fear as she followed me down the dark aisles. We moved cautiously, each step feeling like it echoed louder than the last. It was surreal, walking through the store with just the faint beam of my flashlight cutting through the dark. The storm outside raged on, howling wind slamming against the glass walls. My phone was dead now, no longer of any use. I glanced back at the girl, her face pale and anxious. It was hard to tell if she was truly scared or if something was off about her too. Maybe she was just caught up in the moment, caught in a fear of the unknown. "Stay here," I said to her once we reached the front. I moved toward the counter to grab the keys to the back door, praying we could just leave and get to safety. But just as I was about to reach for the keys, I heard footsteps behind me. I spun around, there was no one there. I froze. The storm outside was deafening, but there was something even more unsettling about the silence in the store now. Then I heard it. A soft thud, followed by a low grunt. I turned, flashlight shaking in my hand. There, at the end of the aisle, stood the man from the counter, his eyes wide and bloodshot. He was holding a wrench in his hand, and his face was covered in blood. He's dead," he muttered, his voice shaky and erratic. "The girl, she killed him." My heart slammed against my chest. The man's words hung in the air like a suffocating cloud. His disheveled appearance, the blood staining his clothes, all screamed that something terrible had happened. My flashlight trembled in my hand as I tried to process what he had just said. "She killed him?" I repeated, unsure if I had heard correctly. My heart raced, my breath coming out in short, panicked bursts. There was no way. The girl had seemed terrified, not like someone who would kill anyone. I glanced over my shoulder. The girl was gone. The space where she had been just moments ago was now empty. My stomach lurched as I realized that I had no idea where she had gone. Had she taken advantage of the darkness to slip away? Or had she been involved in something even darker than I had imagined? "Where is she?" I demanded, my voice trembling as I took a step back. The man's eyes widened, his hands shaking uncontrollably. I didn't... She came from the back, out of nowhere, I swear," he stammered, his words coming out in fragments. He was talking to her, and then she hit him. With the wrench. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This didn't make sense. The girl had seemed so frightened. But now, the whole situation felt wrong, the pieces not fitting together. I turned to face the back of the store, my heart pounding in my chest. Could she have been the one behind it all? The thought was unbearable. Everything about her had seemed so innocent, so vulnerable. But now, in the shadows of the store, I wasn't so sure. The man's voice cut through my thoughts. She's here." I whipped around, but there was no one in sight. The store was dead silent, save for the howling storm outside. The lights flickered above us, casting eerie shadows on the rows of merchandise. Then I heard it, a soft sound, almost imperceptible, but unmistakable. The faintest scrape of footsteps. The floor was wet from the rain outside, and the sound of shoes on the linoleum floor sent a chill down my spine. They were coming closer. I grabbed the wrench the man had dropped earlier, my hand shaking as I held it in front of me like a weapon. My breath hitched as I watched the shadows stretch and twist along the walls, creating unnatural shapes in the flickering light. The footsteps grew louder. I could hear her now. The girl. But she wasn't running. She wasn't even moving quickly. No, it was as if she was deliberately trying to sneak up on me, her steps slow and calculated. I swallowed hard, stepping backward. My heart hammered in my chest, and I couldn't shake the overwhelming sense that I was about to be caught in something far more terrifying than I had ever imagined. A low, guttural chuckle broke the silence. My blood ran cold. "Don't worry," a voice said, calm and chilling. "We're almost done here." I spun around, but there was no one there. The words felt like they were spoken directly into my ear, and I couldn't tell if the voice belonged to the girl The man, or something else entirely. Panic clawed at my throat. I turned back toward the front of the store, gripping the wrench tighter, trying to steady my shaking hands. But when I reached the counter, I froze. She was standing there just a few feet away, her face barely visible in the dim light. Her blonde hair hung loose around her face, dripping with sweat, but her eyes were the worst part. They were empty, hollow, like there was no one home, like she was no longer the girl I had spoken to earlier. Her lips curled into a twisted smile, one that didn't belong on a face so young. "You should have left," she whispered, her voice eerily calm. Before I could react, she stepped forward, and the world seemed to tilt. The lights above flickered violently, casting long shadows on the walls. I swung the wrench at her, but it was like she wasn't even there. My hand passed through her as if she were made of smoke. The store groaned under the pressure of the storm outside. The door slammed against the wall, and I felt the air grow colder. The windows rattled, as if the wind itself was trying to tear the building apart. And then, just like that, everything stopped. The power came back on, the lights flaring to life. I stood in the middle of the store, alone, the wrench still clenched in my hand. The girl was gone, but the man with the wrench, was still there. His eyes were wide with terror as he backed away from me, his hands raised in surrender. "She's not human," he stammered, his voice high-pitched with fear. I turned to look at him, my body numb. His words were too much to process, too insane to believe. But I had no answers. Who was she?" I whispered, my voice hoarse. He shook his head, tears streaming down his face. "I don't know. But she's not the same. None of us are." A sudden realization hit me like a punch to the gut. I glanced toward the back of the store. There was a door barely visible in the shadows. It wasn't there before. It couldn't have been. It wasn't part of the layout. I ran for it, my footsteps echoing through the store, leaving the man behind. When I reached the door, I opened it. Inside, the darkness was suffocating. But there, at the center of the room, was a large mirror. As I stepped closer, I saw myself reflected in the glass. But something was wrong. My face was distorted, twisted into a grotesque version of my own. Behind me, I saw her, the girl, standing in the shadows, watching me with those hollow eyes. The reflection grinned. I stumbled back, my heart racing. Then, the door slammed shut, and the world went dark. And that was the last time I ever worked the night shift at that Target. No one ever found the girl, or the man. The police searched the store, but the room was gone, as if it had never existed. The mirror, the door, it was all just a figment of my imagination, they said. But I know what I saw, and I'll never forget her smile.